It has never been easy being an outcast. Even the great Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu might have had this unpleasant experience, and he wrote about it in his Tao Te Ching Chapter 20. We will talk about it and discover the hidden reason why people with great wisdom often end up alone. What's the difference between yes and no? What's the difference between beautiful and ugly? Must one dread what others dread? Oh, barbarity, will it ever end? Other people are joyous, like on the feast of the ox, like on the way up to the terrace in spring. I alone am inert, giving no sign, like a newborn baby who has not learned to smile. I am wearied, as if I lacked a home to go to. Other people have more than they need. I alone seem wanting. I have the mind of a fool, understanding nothing. The common people see clearly. I alone am held in the dark. The common people are sharp. Only I am clumsy, like drifting on the waves of the sea, without direction. Other people are occupied. I alone am unwilling, like the outcast. I alone am different from the others, because I am nourished by the Great Mother. So, welcome back on my channel to chapter 20 of the famous Tao Te Ching by the great Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu. And well, this one is interesting because we do not even exactly know what belongs to this chapter by Lao Tzu and what was added on later. Because the problem is, in the oldest version that has been found of this text, I think 200 before Christ, this chapter is only composed of the first 3 lines, okay, which are, what's the difference between yes and no? Must one dread what others dread, and oh barbarity, will it ever end? And then we have texts which are found a bit later, 2 of them, which are having what is the difference between beautiful and ugly? Must one dread what others dread? Oh barbarity, will it ever end? And all of the rest. Okay, so that's a lot more text we have for this chapter. And it's not really clear whether the first one is just, well, just left out stuff because there's a lot of text missing in that version, or if the newer texts have added on stuff by other writers. Okay, so that is something we have to deal with. And then there's the difference with the first line. Is it what's the difference between yes and no? Or is it what's the difference between beautiful and ugly? And I followed this this version of the text I used. I link it in the description, which takes which takes both versions of the text in one. Okay, so in this we have both. And basically from the meaning, well, it's quite similar. What's the difference between yes and no, and what's the difference between ugly and beautiful, which of course is a symbol for what's the difference between yin and yang. Okay, what's the difference between opposites? So he's asking that question. And then he goes on saying, must one dread what others dread? Isn't that interesting? So, what is the difference between yes and no? What is the difference between beautiful and ugly? And must one dread what others dread? Does we have to fear something only because others fear that? And in relation to the first line, what is the difference between yin yang? That means that is that judgment that other people have about something, for example, is something to be feared? Is it dreadful? Is that in the end, like, is that the ultimate judgment? Should we give anything about that? Must one dread what others dread? Is it important whether one says you're ugly? Is it important whether one says you're beautiful? Is that really so important? Must we dread what others dread? And then he's saying, oh barbarity, will it ever end? So what he's implying here is that by that judgment that people do, or by that judgment that people have, barbarity is following that. Okay? And we can see that in so many examples. Like, for example, people have done horrible things to each other because the one is calling God that and the other one is calling God that. And for the one, that is Buddha. For the other one, that is Buddha. So dreadful, really horrible things have happened because of people having their judgment and taking their judgment seriously. Okay, very seriously. So that they do barbarous things to other people, not having the same judgment. Okay, so that is what Lao Tzu is referring here in the first paragraph. What's the difference between yes and no? What's the difference between beautiful and ugly? Must one dread what others dread? Oh barbarity, will it ever end? Will people ever end to put so much into their own conclusions, into their own judgments, into their own ideas, that they will carry out barbarous actions? Okay, so that's what Lao Tzu is criticizing here, in my opinion. Okay, so don't take the difference between yes and no so seriously. Okay. So, and now we come to the question whether everything which follows here belongs to that what Lao Tzu originally wrote, if we assume that he wrote it anyway, but or not, because you will see the tone is changing now, and he does that sometimes, but in this case, well, we'll see. So he's continuing. Other people are joyous, like on the feast of the ox, like on the way up to the terrace in the spring. Okay, so he's basically saying other people, normal people, they have a good life. Okay, so, but he, Lao Tzu, I alone am inert, giving no sign. Like a newborn baby who has not learned to smile, I am wearied as if I lacked a home to go to. Okay, so he's describing his situation as different. Not moving, inert, giving no sign. And that might refer to the state of meditation, right? If you think of people sitting in the forests or in mountain caves and just sitting there absolutely still, exploring the spiritual realm, so to speak, but giving no sign to the outside. And what's interesting is that he describes himself as being wearied, as if I lacked a home to go to. So, well, it sounds like he's exhausted, right? He's exhausted because he cannot really come home. So as if he is searching for something, and he's longing to find something, cannot find it, and is exhausted. Okay, and that is, yeah, great contrast to what he describes other people as being joyous and, you know. So the text, so what we can now take out of this paragraph is that he makes a clear difference between him and the normal people. Okay, so they are joyous, I am inert. They have a home to go to, I don't. Okay, so that's the first paragraph. The second paragraph, actually. So let's go to the third. Other people have more than they need. I alone seem wanting. I have the mind of a fool, understanding nothing. This really reminds me of Shakespeare. Yeah, it's a great monologue, I think. So again, other people have more than they need. They are fine. I am wanting. And this is so funny because in other chapters, as we know, he described quite the opposite. He always said common people are never satisfied and always want more, and on and on. And the fulfilled Taoist master, he is the one who feels deep satisfaction. And now it's the other way around, okay? So he's saying, all the other people have more than they need. I alone am wanting. I seem wanting. I have the mind of a fool, understanding nothing. And this also, as the last paragraph, describes a state of being on the hunt for the real knowledge, being on the search, being a seeker. Understanding nothing means you keep asking, you keep searching. The mind of a fool. Okay. Next paragraph. The common people see clearly. I alone am held in the dark. The common people are sharp. Only I am clumsy, like a drifting on the waves of the sea without direction. This, I think this refers to the mind, or the ratio that he is constantly in this work, in the Tao Te Ching, is criticizing. That people think they are so clear in their mind and think they are sharp and witty and they know how things work, but they're just looking at the surface. Okay, and so this is in alignment with things he says in other chapters. So common people see clearly, I alone am held in the dark. The common people are sharp, only I am clumsy, like drifting on the waves of the sea without direction. That also could refer to the state of meditation. Being still in the universe, drifting on the waves of the mind, of the soul, without having clear direction. So it is not fully clear to me whether he is whether that what she describes, whether he likes that. Is that a good state? Is that good that other people are, have this idea of sharpness, but actually, is that good or bad? I'm not quite sure with this. And that leads me to being not quite sure whether he actually wrote this. Or whether this is a commentary by later authors on basically the first 4 lines, right? I will elaborate on that later. Let's finish the text first. So other people are occupied. I alone am unwilling, like the outcast. I alone am different from the others, because I am nourished by the Great Mother. Okay, so that's the conclusion. Other people are occupied, and you could also understand this in a normal, like Taoist sense that, yeah, people occupy their minds with all kinds of stuff, and I'm unwilling to do that. I'm an outcast in that sense, because I am communicating, I am nourished by the Great Mother. Okay, the Great Mother could refer to the Great Yin, which is the Earth, Mother Earth, or it could refer to the Tao as a whole, because the Tao, of course, is not yin, not yang. The Tao is that which is before, so it could be described as a Great Mother, as well as the Great Father, right? And both is used in the Tao Te Ching. So here we have this reference to the Taoist master who says, I am different from the common people because I am nourished directly by the Great Mother. I am sitting in the center of the universe, communicating with the Great Tao, and normal people are not. And this might refer to this chapter as a whole. If we take the whole as what it is, it might refer to the quite common happening that when you discover great mystic knowledge, that it becomes harder and harder for people. Well, it becomes harder and harder to find people you can talk with them about these things, because these mystical experiences, if you have had one, please feel free to share in the comments. Mystical experiences, you cannot share them with everyone, because there are people who will call you crazy. There are people who will just say you've been mistaken or you've been fantasizing. And even if people believe you, if they hadn't had that type of experience, they will not be able to truly relate. So that can be hard. That can be hard at times when you have experienced something but cannot talk with anyone about that. And if you try to talk about that, then they might find you strange, at least. Or you might even scare them, right? So in human history, people who had greater insight into laws of nature or into medicine, for example, think of the witches in the Middle Ages. It wasn't always that nice to be different and to know more. People have actually killed you for that. People have hunted you for that, for being different, for having insight, because they did not understand. Okay, so that is quite something, right? And it might be the case that Lao Tzu, if he wrote this, was dealing with that feeling of, well, yeah, being an outcast, nobody understands him, being the only one that has full access to the wisdom of the Great Mother, of the Great Tao, so that he might have really felt alone at times. And like I just said, there's a lot of instances in life, and there has been over the centuries, where people have felt that way, even though they were wise people, or smart people, or extraordinary people in some sense. There comes a downside with that. And it might be that Lao Tzu expresses his frustration and maybe pain with that situation, right? And that could be like also a reflection, like all of this could be a reflection of the first 4 lines, right? Because what's the difference between yes and no? What's the difference between beautiful and ugly? Must one dread what others dread? Oh, barbarity, will it ever end? So that he's saying like, oh, does it has to be that way? You know, only because I think this and you think that, do we have to be enemies? Does it has to be that way? What a barbarity, right? So mainly I think he's advocating for real tolerance, which means to not take the words and to not take the judgments as seriously. And that leading to being nice to everyone, okay? Because whatever we think is right or wrong, we should get along with each other first and in a good way, so that no one has to be the outcast, okay? I think that that's really what this chapter is about. Yeah, that's a nice thing to end with. So that was chapter 20. I hope you join me again in chapter 21. I enjoyed it very much. And yeah, so if you like this content, please feel free to subscribe and leave a like. And yeah, see you again in chapter 21. Bye bye.